So after that was David Wiltshire's Scent of Madness, and this was okay. I would say that it was entertaining, though perhaps not particularly well written. So this is about a doctor, Dr. Jean Hacker, and she works at a hospital in an unknown town, which we don't really even realize where it is until later on. And David Wiltshire is British, and so he writes with a British syntax and a British grammar, and his phrases are very British, as you might expect. We don't learn until about halfway through the book that it's supposed to be taking place in New England, in the United States, which is kind of odd because all the characters have British mannerisms and they have, British traits in their speaking patterns. And anyway, so Dr. Jean Hacker goes in to see a patient who has just been brought in, who is in a coma, and he is a special forces operative who has been brought in from Afghanistan. He was held captive and tortured by a woman who had a rose sent to her, like a rose-scented perfume. And it just so happens that Dr. Hacker is wearing a rose-scented perfume. And when she leans over to talk to him to try to, maybe bring him out of this coma, what wakes him up is her perfume, and he realizes, because he is having this post-traumatic stress, and that because he never saw the lady torturing him, he never saw her face, he only knows her scent. And so he is convinced that Jean Hacker is the lady who has been torturing him. But Jean Hacker is in the middle of a divorce from a loveless marriage with another doctor at the hospital, and she is very, very drawn to this special forces man. And so he wakes up and he starts playing this kind of, how can I get her off by herself, because he's messed up in the head, and he's going to take her out because he thinks she is this lady who is torturing him. And at the same time, there is like a pervy handyman who goes around doing some really messed up stuff, like crawling into vents to look through them into like women's changing rooms and things like that, and stealing articles of their clothing. And there are murders that start happening around this hospital, which we think may be in Britain, but turns out it's in the United States. But David Wiltshire writes everything like it's in Britain, and all the characters kind of speak like they're British. They have British speech patterns and things, which is a little bit odd. And so, he is a special forces guy, so he's sneaking around and paranoid and like stealing things when nobody's looking. And we are there are so many red herrings in this book, right? So we're led to believe, well, this person is doing the murders, or no, it's the special forces guy doing the murders, or it's Jean Hacker's husband, or it's this pervy handyman. And it goes back and forth like crazy, and you're just going, okay, well, it's this guy. Well, no, it's this guy. No, it's this guy. Or maybe it's this lady. And I'm not, the romance between the special forces guy and Jean Hacker, she really likes him. And he pretends to like her, but he's kind of like going back and forth, like, why is she so nice to me all of a sudden? Why is she treating me like this? But he's battling in his head with this, the torturer with the scent of roses. And I don't want to ruin it. I don't want to spoil it. I will just say that it goes back and forth between all these different possibilities of who's doing these things, and then it comes to a head. And I didn't care for the way that it was written, really, because it seemed kind of rushed, and I hate to say it, but it seemed a little bit amateurish because of that, because it was rushed. And so going from one person's point of view to another, you sometimes don't realize it while you're reading. And that's really bothersome, because you'll be reading and then it'll switch to somebody else's perspective, but you won't notice. And after a page, you're going, well, how did she get from this place to this place? And then you realize it's in another guy's head entirely. I I don't know. It just it didn't really work for me. But I read the whole thing and I did enjoy it. It just could have been executed better. Is what I'm trying to say. Okay. After that, I read John Barnes's Wartide Timeraider Wartide. So this is about a Vietnam veteran who is living in the early 90s, and he's kind of gone through life. He's still very fit, very physically fit, and everything. But the only thing he was really good at was being a he was kind of like a Rambo figure, right? He was in special forces and everything, and he's very physically trained. He's got all these different martial arts skills and everything, and he has a friend, and his friend has taken him in. His friend runs like a karate dojo for little kids and everything, and so he is working there, and they have an old teacher who sends a man to them. His name is Master G, and Master G is kind of very much out of like 70s kung fu shows, right? He's kind of mystical and he's mysterious. And I want to see what this guy's name is. Dan Sampson. His name was Dan Sampson. I read this all in a single day. It's not very long or anything, and it was just entertaining. This is like an offshoot from the, not an offshoot, but it's by Golden Eagle, who did the Deathlands books. And Master G really wants to talk to Dan Sampson, but he has no time. He has to get to the hospital because he's going to be paid some money. They are doing like a regression type thing, like they're doing scans, and they are trying to see like if warriors have these past life memories of being in other wars, right? And Master G, that they're going to pay him some money. He desperately needs the money, so he goes to the hospital. And Master G is like, well, we'll talk later, right? And he Dan runs off to the hospital, and they put him in this thing, kind of out of like, what is that? The Arnold Schwarzenegger movie? Is it Total Recall, where he sits in the thing and he wants to take a trip to Mars, but it turns out he was a spy and everything, and you don't really know if it's just him taking his adventurous trip to Mars in his head or if it's actually happening. It's kind of like that. So in the middle of being in this scanner and having these memories come up to him of these past lives, he hears gunfire, and he wakes up and he gets out, and there's a guy who has went berserk and is flipped out because his girlfriend left him, so he has come in and he's shooting this place up. And Dan Sampson takes care of business, right? But he is grievously wounded in the middle of all of this. And when the paramedics are taking him out, Master G appears and sends Dan Sampson back in time, and then he vanishes, and everybody forgets what happened and forgets who Dan Sampson was and forgets that Master G was ever there. And Dan is sent back in time to the Italian front in World War II, and he's put into this body of, well, he looks exactly the same. This is like his past life, right? And he was a guy named, he has a really interesting name. It's like Jackson something, Jackson Ferguson, or let me see. I hope I can find it. Jackson Houston. His name was Jackson Houston. But he is like this black marketeer, this guy who is trying to profit off the war, and nobody in his platoon likes him, or his company. Nobody in his company likes him. And he's always smuggling cigarettes, he's trying to get out of work this way or that way, and nobody likes him. He's not a very likable person. And he's completely different from Dan Sampson, because Dan is very much the like virtuous Boy Scout patriot, right? He's like true blue. He is all the best qualities of an American and none of the bad qualities. So when he's stuck in this different body, just Jackson Houston's body in this circumstance, he's just appalled by this man and appalled by what he's been up to, and he realizes that he has to kind of right the wrongs of what was happening in this past life of his. And it's very much like that Scott Bakula show, Quantum Leap, right? Very much like Quantum Leap. And there is this Italian count, and he's up to something very, very shady in his mansion. And Dan Sampson and an OSS man and a French colonel go to find out what is going on. And there's just all these action scenes that go on, and this dastardly plot, right, that's going to win the war for Germany. And I really, really enjoyed this. It was really good. And so Dan Sampson at the end, I mean, this is not a spoiler really, because this is the beginning of a series. He is killed, and because this is his past life, right? He's killed and he goes into another past life. So that was the beginning of this series. I don't know how many of these there were. I don't imagine there were a lot, but it was really good and I enjoyed it. And so the most recent book I've read is Lonely Vigil by Walter Lord. This is really very good, I thought. So it is about the Coastwatchers in the Solomon Islands in World War II, and they hid in the jungle and lived with the native people. And they had these gigantic radios that they were split up into like 4 or 5 parts, and each part weighed 60 or 70, 75 pounds. And they would hide in the jungles and watch for airplanes, like Japanese airplanes coming over, or watch the ocean to see the Japanese ships coming by, and they would radio all this information to the Americans, to the Australians, and they were almost all Australian or British. And there was one American coast watcher, and he was just a guy who was kind of bored with what he was doing, and he requested permission to go and be a coast watcher. And they were like, well, all right, go on, get lost, to go do it. And they lived extremely dangerous lives. So the Solomon Islands, part of the Solomon Islands is Guadalcanal, for instance, Rabaul. I'm not entirely sure if that's how you pronounce that. The Battle of the Coral Sea happened around there, and then later on the Americans invaded Guadalcanal. And so this was about a period of about a year, something like that, where they were hiding in the jungle. And, they would just be walking through the jungle and come upon a Japanese squad or a Japanese company and have to run off, abandon everything and run off. There are accounts of how they helped evacuate priests and nuns and people who had been stuck behind enemy lines. This was really, really good, but it was kind of fragmented in the sense that the people weren't always there for the full duration of the war. We go for the duration from where the Japanese invaded the Solomon Islands until they were booted out of the Solomon Islands. So we go from person to person to person. Some of them share very similar names, and it's all told in Walter Lord's very interesting style. He can make just about anything interesting, but this has been kind of my least favorite book of his that I've read so far. Well, I read his book about Dunkirk, Miracle at Dunkirk, about 3 months ago, and it shared that same sort of, he tried to put everything into the book, right? And so that detracts from it a little bit, but it was still really good. And of course we have JFK, so John Kennedy, on PT-109. In the middle of the night he was rammed, his PT boat was rammed by a Japanese destroyer, and his story is in this, how he was found and brought to some coast watchers. And now his story is not told in depth or anything, but it does detail the story, and it was really interesting. That's an interesting tale because I'm not the biggest fan of John F. Kennedy. I'll be honest. His personal life was pretty messed up. I mean, I guess if your father was Joe Kennedy, your life was going to be pretty messed up. Joe Kennedy was a messed up human being. But, I mean, there is no denying that what JFK did with PT-109, swimming for miles and miles and miles with, like a strap from a life vest of an injured man in his teeth and that sort of thing, that is very heroic, right? So my feelings about JFK are conflicted, and maybe I'll talk about that later on at some point. Because he was kind of both the light and the dark, right? Everything was in JFK. I think that's why he captivates so many people. Not me in particular. He doesn't captivate me. And never has. I don't know why. I think that I was introduced to his dark side early on with like documentaries and things, so I tend to see him from that angle and not from the public golden boy angle, right? Anyway, I'm going on about JFK, but this is Walter Lord's Lonely Vigil, and there is Walter Lord there on Guadalcanal, and there are lots of pictures and things of the people who participated, some of the pictures that they actually took in the moment, and just a really good book. I have yet to read a Walter Lord book that wasn't interesting and wasn't well written, even if they are kind of fragmented at times. There's a map, and there's a map of the Solomon Islands here in the beginning. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it. And I didn't think that I could do like a single video about this book, or I would have, but it was really good. I enjoyed it. I'm probably rambling now. So what I am perhaps reading now, I thought I would go over what I may read soon and may not. I don't know. These are just on my stack of things that I may read. And I am in the middle of a book right now, but I don't want to talk about it because it's for, I'll be talking about it hopefully in another video, hopefully. I've been kind of up and down with videos lately. I've been having, I don't know, like this change in seasons has hit me really hard. Sometimes it doesn't, but this year it really has. So here is Scarecrow by Matthew Riley. This is a Shane Schofield adventure. I read his book Ice Hunt a few months ago and really, really enjoyed it because it is like an over-the-top B-movie, action movie. And I really, really liked that once I understood what was going on. And I've been wanting to read another one. So this is Scarecrow, and apparently like some international assassins are sent out to hunt him down. Here's one I just got today. This is a kind of like a thriller or a suspense book. It's about a cop or a sheriff in a small town in the Midwest. Something really bad happens in his town, and an outsider has to come in and help him with this investigation of this murder. And that looks really good. I have never heard of Donald Harstat before, but it's I like to try new suspense writers every now and then. Another potential is The List of Seven by Mark Frost. I heard about this recently. Am I wrong in thinking that this is like a Sherlock Holmes pastiche or something very close to that? So it sounds really good. And it has this really cool cover, right? This frontispiece or whatever. So that may be pretty soon because it sort of fits with the time. And these others are just perhaps, maybe. This is category 5 about a airplane caught up in a hurricane and some dastardly stuff going on, and a guy who's sent there to figure it out. Branded Woman by Wade Miller. This is about a lady who's a jewel thief, and another jewel thief like attacks her and leaves her scarred, and she goes out for revenge. That sounds really, really interesting. This is a book from the 50s, I believe. Not this copy, of course, but the book itself. And Able Team Shot to Hell. Let's see. Able Team erupts in a two-fisted quest for justice. So this is like Reagan era action. I've just, in the middle of like Kent State and CIA Director William Colby's autobiography, I've just been kind of wanting to read fun books lately. And I may read this copy of National Geographic. I have a bunch of National Geographics from the 70s and 80s and the late 60s, I think. Yeah. And so I've just been wanting to read them. And lately I bought a new camera. Not a new camera, new to me, but a used camera, like a serious camera with interchangeable lenses and everything. So I have been really, really looking into photographs. And what better place to look at photography than National Geographic? So I may very well be reading several of these. And I've actually been buying quite a few books on photography and of photographs. And I may be talking about those soon. And in fact, I forgot to mention that I read a book about photography. It's right over here. But I wanted to talk about the photos in it. So I may do that in a separate video if anyone is interested. Anyway, so that's what I have been reading. Do a stack here. What's that? Oh, kind of disorganized today, I guess. But anyway, I hope this isn't really super long. It looks like it's going to be about 40 minutes long. But anyway, I want to thank you for joining me. I want to apologize for how long this is. And I'll see you next time.